Richard Widmark is a man whose films supposedly left a lasting mark on what many nostalgically recall as the golden era of Hollywood.
Have you ever played badminton?
Yes, ma'am.
He traipsed from the cold, nondescript corners of Minnesota to the glaring lights of Hollywood, fighting tooth and nail. Or so they say, for every scrap of success he clung to. But honestly, how much do you really know about his so-called arduous journey? If you're in the dark, then buckle up, because this video promises a deep dive into every nook and cranny of Richard Widmark's life.
We're gonna have some fun together. Lots of fun.
Born in the backwaters of Sunrise Township, Minnesota, on the chilly winter day of December 26, 1914, Richard Widmark entered a world far removed from the glitz he'd later be associated with. Before he could even start forming memories, his father, Carl Henry Widmark, struck by the classic case of Midwestern restlessness, or perhaps just bored out of his mind, uprooted the family. They moved to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, a place not exactly known as the land of dreams and opportunities. But hey, when you're a traveling salesman like Carl, the world is your unpredictable oyster. Now, young Richard, a mere toddler, was thrown into this new setting, far from the beginnings that one day would seem almost mythic compared to the lights of Hollywood. The irony of it all. Here he was, in the heartland of America, far from the future glitz and glamour, finding solace in the least expected of places, the warm, albeit creaky, embrace of his grandmother's home. This wasn't just any grandmother, mind you, but a fervent admirer of Tom Mix, the kind of woman who knew her way around a movie plot better than her own kitchen. It was this very grandmother, with her own form of escape, who introduced Richard to the world of cinema, dragging the boy into the shadowy realms of the local movie theaters. This wasn't just a pastime, it was a ritual, a gateway to a different universe, far from the drabness of their everyday reality. The seed of cinema was planted in Richard's young mind, not gently, but rather like a slapdash throw of fate. Was this the moment a star was born, or was it simply a child finding a respite from the dull ache of the so-called real world? But let's cut through the nostalgia. Was Richard's early foray into the world of film a predestined path to stardom, or merely a young boy's attempt to escape the banality of his surroundings? It's amusing, isn't it? How the narrative is spun as if every childhood movie outing is a direct line to Hollywood. In Richard's case, those flickering images on the screen became his escape hatch from the mundane to the magnificent. Yet, one can't help but wonder, if not for those early, seemingly insequential movie dates with Grandma, would Richard Widmark have found his way to the silver screen, or would he have just ended up another face in the crowd, lost in the vast, unremarkable expanse of the American Midwest? Richard's dad gets the axe from his day job and decides, why not become a baker? Because, of course, that's the logical next step. Off to Princeton, Illinois they go, where dear old dad suddenly fancies himself the next big thing in bread and pastries. Richard, ever the optimist, slapped on a grin, thinking this might just be the new dawn they were waiting for. Meanwhile, he's slogging through the drudgery of Princeton high school life, just another face among the hopeful and the hopeless, trying to make something, anything, out of the mundane everyday. But wait, there's more drama brewing. His parents decide to throw in the towel on their marriage right as he's dipping his toes into junior college. Classic, isn't it? Dad's out doing his best bakery impression, while Mom, Ethel, decides she's sticking it out in Princeton, holding down the fort until Richard can wave goodbye to academia with that all-important piece of paper in hand. Fast forward to the grand entrance in 1932. Richard steps onto the Lake Forest College stage, ready to conquer the world, graduating amidst fanfare and academic regalia in 1936. Suddenly, he's Mr. College Hero, juggling footballs, charming the masses, and landing a sweet third place in the Illinois State Oratory Contest. Look at him, the emerging star, dabbling in drama, soaking up the adulation under those bright college lights. It's all so picture perfect, isn't it? The all-American dream unfolding one act at a time. But let's not get carried away. Beneath the surface, it's just another chapter in the classic tale of small-town boy makes good, chasing the elusive shadows of fame and fulfillment, all while navigating the tricky waters of familial fallout and personal transformation. But let's face it, Richard's so-called burning passion for law quickly fizzled out, didn't it? One whiff of the theatrical, and he's all starry-eyed, ditching the dignified halls of justice for the chaotic embrace of the stage. Ah, The classic tale of a young man's flighty infatuation with the arts. Amidst the personal plot twists and turns, he bumps into Gene Hazelwood, another drama junkie. And just like that, they're two peas in a melodramatic pod. Fast forward a mere couple of years, and there's Richard, bidding adieu to the familiar cornfields of Illinois, his eyes set on the glaring neon of New York City in 1938, his dreams ballooning out of all sensible proportions. Now, in the so-called land of opportunity, Richard doesn't exactly hit the Broadway jackpot, but finds himself navigating the choppy, somewhat less glamorous waters of radio soap operas. Imagine that. From aspiring lawyer to would-be stage legend to radio actor? And just when you think this script couldn't get any more cliched, in walks Gene, his old college flame, into the same obscure radio world. It's as if destiny itself got lazy and decided to recycle their storyline. There they are, reigniting old flames surrounded by the static and scripts of daytime radio, living out their secondhand love story, while the real world churns on the outside. It's also predictably quaint, their lives intertwining in the most convenient of narratives, bound by the invisible threads of forgotten radio dramas and rekindled romances. Richard was riding the airwaves like a pro, his voice a familiar comfort in the homesick silence of many a living room. Then, quicker than you can say, I do, he and Jean tied the knot back in her old stomping grounds, Evanston, Illinois. Life seemed peachy, a real picture-perfect postcard of domestic bliss. But, as fate would have it, not all was rosy in Richard's world. Come 1943, tragedy struck with the heavy hand of wartime reality. Richard's younger brother, Donald, a soldier thrown into the chaos of war, found his plane shot down over the picturesque but perilous skies of the Netherlands. The family was plunged into a sea of uncertainty, their hopes dimming like a sunset on the battlefield. But then, a glimmer of hope. News trickled in that one soul had survived the wreckage, and lo and behold, it was Donald, the prodigal brother, miraculously spared only to be tossed into the grim confines of a German prison. There, he languished for what must have felt like an eternity. A year and a half of his life lost to cold, unforgiving bars until the war's end mercifully set him free. But freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose, isn't it? Post-war, Richard, ever the dutiful brother, stepped in, trying to piece back together what the war had torn apart. Yet, the scars ran deep, and Donald, forever changed by his ordeal, faded away, leaving this world at the cruelly young age of 39 in 1955. Life's cruel jests never seemed to end. During life's storms, a ray of light broke through the clouds. 1945 brought with it the arrival of Anne Widmark, Richard and Jean's bundle of joy, a new chapter in an ongoing saga. And Richard? Well, he was making a decent living, strutting his stuff on Broadway and keeping the radio waves hot, a steady beacon in the post-war gloom. Then, as if scripted by fate, Richard's big break came knocking in the form of Darryl F. Zanuck, a name that carried weight in circles where dreams were made and shattered in the same breath. Zanuck, with an eye for talent and drama, handed Richard the role of a lifetime in Kiss of Death, 1947. Enter Tommy Udo, the kind of sadistic villain that sends shivers down your spine. A role so chilling it stuck to Richard like a second shadow. Here was a character that lived in the dark corners of the mind, a leap from the radio waves to the haunting echoes of the silver screen. Richard Widmark, once the voice of comfort, now a harbinger of nightmares. Oh, how the tables turn in the whimsical world of showbiz. Oh, the tale behind this flick is one for the books, tinged with the kind of irony that makes Hollywood the circus it is. Director Henry Hathaway threw one look at Richard Widmark's towering forehead and declared him no killer. More brainiac than brute, really. But Darryl F. Zanuck, ever the gambler in the high-stakes game of film, saw something else. A glimmer of the macabre, perhaps, behind that scholarly dome. And so, against the odds, Richard was shoehorned into a role that seemed as mismatched as a clown at a funeral. Yet, as fate would have it, this misfit turned into gold. Richard's portrayal snagged him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Sure, he didn't clinch the Oscar, but he did catapult into stardom on his very first leap. A Hollywood fairy tale if there ever was one. His maniacal laugh etched into the annals of film history, proving perhaps that even the most unlikely of ducks can turn into a swan, or in this case, a celebrated psychopath. Then, as if by some stroke of magic, or perhaps just the old Hollywood machine churning as it does, 20th Century Fox threw a 7-year contract his way. Imagine that. From high forehead to high stakes, Richard never saw it coming. This began the illustrious chapter of Richard Widmark, the accidental star. In 1948, he graced the screen in Yellow Sky, sharing the dusty stage with Gregory Peck and Ann Baxter. Playing the gambler, Dude, he stamped his ticket into the Western genre, a seamless transition from sadistic laughter to the brooding intensity of the Wild West. "See you dead, Stretch," he drawled, and with those words, solidified his place in the Cowboy Hall of Fame, or at least in the hearts of Western aficionados. But why stop at one genre? In the same breath of fame, Richard slid into Roadhouse, mixing it up with Ida Lupino and Cornel Wilde, then skulked through the shadows of The Street with No Name. Hollywood's new darling wasn't about to pigeonhole himself. By 1949, he was sailing to Pacific adventures with Down to the Sea in ships, under the watchful eye of Henry Hathaway once again, and braving the storms in Slattery's Hurricane, directed by Andre de Toth. Richard Widmark, the man with the high forehead and the higher ambition, was proving to be quite the chameleon. His early typecasting as a lunatic killer morphing into a portfolio as diverse as the genres he gallivanted through. From killer to cowboy to captain, he was the man of the hour, or at the very least, the flavor of the decade. The later chapters of Richard Widmark's career unfold with a tinge of the bittersweet, the taste of Hollywood's gilded cage. Here's Widmark, begrudgingly donning the mantle of the bigot, each role chafing against his moral grain like a poorly tailored suit. Bound by the ironclad chains of studio contracts, he found himself trapped in a parade of unsavory characters that left a sour taste in his mouth. In 1950, alongside Sidney Poitier in No Way Out, Richard played the bigot with such conviction that he felt compelled to reassure Sidney after each take, "Sid, this is just a movie. I don't mean that personally." It was a dance of discomfort, where apology became the backstage mantra, a testament to the personal integrity clashing with professional obligations. From this cauldron of on-screen tension, a friendship was forged, a silver lining in an otherwise murky cloud. Then came 1951, with Halls of Montezuma, a World War II spectacle casting Richard alongside Carl Malden. There he was, diving into the gritty, gun-laden landscapes of Japanese-held islands, spewing lines like, "All pretty boy, don't make me shoot." Another brick in the facade of the tough guy, another day at the office in the factory of dreams. Fast forward to 1954, and we see Richard in Broken Lance, marking the end of his studio shackles with the parting shot, "You wanted us? No, I don't. Who told you to?" Words dripping with the irony of a man about to sever his own Hollywood binds. With the ink drying on his release papers, Richard stepped out from the shadow of the studio monoliths and breathed the free air of independence. He launched Heath Productions, a nod to his daughter, charting his own course in the treacherous waters of film production. The late 50s saw him embracing a slew of characters, from William Edwards in Time Limit to Clint Hollister in The Law and Jake Wade, and Johnny Gannon in Warlock. Each role, a step away from the stereotypes he'd been shoehorned into, each performance a bid to cleanse the palate of the bitter aftertaste of typecasting. Perched in his cozy home nest, he was practically a fixture there. If you listen to his daughter, he was nothing short of a domestic deity, a paragon of the family man archetype. But let's be real, isn't it always that way? Perfect on paper, perfect in the family albums, but what's the real story? This man had a peculiar passion, a burning love for westerns that somehow, against all odds, dragged him through the swinging 60s. He found himself rubbing shoulders with the likes of John Wayne and cinematic classics like The Alamo. Now, there's a laugh. John Wayne, of all people, didn't think Widmark could cut it as a cowboy. He had the audacity to say to his face, "You don't look like a cowboy." The nerve, right? But oh, how Widmark proved him wrong, striding onto the set of Two Rode Together in 1961 and stamping his authority as a Western icon. But let's not gloss over the juicier bits. The women. Oh, the women. They seem to hang on his every word, dazzled by his supposed good nature and kindness. It's almost comedic how some of them reportedly fell head over heels for him. Yet, our dear Richard was allegedly a one-woman man. How quaint. Moving on to family affairs, 1969 brought the wedding bells for Widmark's daughter and Sandy Koufax, a baseball legend. Richard was supposedly over the moon. Happy days, right? But then, as if fate enjoys a good chuckle, the marriage crumbled to dust in 1982. 13 years. Poof. Gone. Now, on to his best friend, Sidney. Oh, the joys of Hollywood friendship, right? Sidney, the great enabler, cast him in the comedy thriller Hanky Panky in 1982. What a ride it must have been, with Widmark's career tallying over 60 films, and then the curtain call, True Colors in 1961, marking the end of an illustrious chapter. But let's not forget the grand finale, the D.W. Griffith Lifetime Achievement Award in 1990, handed over by none other than Buddy Sidney. What an honor. A real cherry on top of a career that, according to the books, was nothing short of stellar. And there you have it, the man, the myth, the legend, with a net worth rounding off at a cool $1.5 million. Not too shabby for a man who, according to John Wayne, didn't even look like a cowboy. Oh, the irony, the drama, the spectacle of it all. Richard Widmark, ladies and gentlemen, a man of many faces, not just the ones he portrayed on screen. And then, as if scripted by a playwright with a penchant for darkness, calamity swooped down on Richard's household. Picture this. His wife, the woman he's shared more than half a century with, gets hit with the Alzheimer's diagnosis. Early stages, they said, as if that's supposed to soften the blow. So begins the slow, torturous 7-year spectacle where Richard and his daughter can do nothing but watch the matriarch of their family fade into a shadow of her former self. It's like watching a ship sink slowly on a clear day. In 1997, Jean Hazelwood, Richard's wife of 55 years, departed from this world, leaving a void no script could fill. Now here comes the so-called peaceful chapter. After Jean's curtain call, Richard decides to bow out from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. He retreats to Roxbury, Connecticut, because nothing screams retirement like a quiet town in New England, right? But oh, the plot thickens as Richard isn't just settling down, he's also getting inducted into the National Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City. Because, of course, nothing seals your legacy like a nod from the cowboy elite, especially when you spent a lifetime pretending to be one on screen. But as the final act unfolds, we find our hero, or anti-hero depending on how you've been following along, facing his own mortality. Health deteriorating, the once robust figure of cinema now battles his own long illness. And on March 24, 2008, the final credits roll for Richard. His departure marks the end of an era, a story that, for some reason, we're all meant to remember and hold dear. His narrative, packed with ups and downs, love and loss, fame and final blows, is etched into the annals of Hollywood lore. But let's face it, it's a story as old as time, just with different players on the stage. Richard's life? Unforgettable? Sure, for those who remember the lines. But for the rest of us, it's just another tale of a star who rose, shone, and eventually dimmed into the vast sky of celebrities. The melancholy twilight of Richard Widmark's illustrious journey. If this dive into faded glory piqued your interest, smash that like button, share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales from the forgotten corners of Hollywood's golden age.